Roman Empire, Episode 7. Pyrrhus and the First Great Test. Part 1. Opening. Rome meets the Hellenistic world. Before Rome fought Carthage, before Hannibal crossed the Alps, before Roman armies marched into Greece, Spain, Asia Minor, or Egypt, there was a quieter but decisive moment when Rome first faced a truly international enemy. This was not a neighboring hill tribe, not a Latin rival, and not a Samnite army from the mountains of Italy. This was a king trained in the world created by Alexander the Great. His name was Pyrrhus of Epirus. To later generations, Pyrrhus would be remembered for a phrase, a Pyrrhic victory, a victory so costly that it begins to feel like defeat. But for Rome, Pyrrhus was much more than a phrase. He was the first great test of Roman endurance against the wider Mediterranean world. He brought professional soldiers, Greek tactics, cavalry, war elephants, royal ambition, and the prestige of Hellenistic monarchy into Italy. At this point in history, Rome was still a republic, not yet an empire. It had conquered much of central Italy and had survived serious crises, including the Gallic sack of Rome and the long Samnite wars. But Rome had not yet proved that it could stand against a king with experience, money, and international connections. The Roman system was powerful inside Italy, but no one yet knew whether it could survive a collision with the military culture of the Greek East. The war against Pyrrhus did not make Rome an empire immediately, but it revealed something essential. Rome could lose battles and still continue. Rome could suffer shock, fear, and destruction, and yet rebuild its armies. Rome could absorb pain in a way that terrified its enemies. This war showed the Mediterranean that Rome was not simply another Italian city-state. It was becoming a political machine with unusual discipline, unusual manpower, and a terrifying refusal to surrender. So in this episode we move south, into the world of Magna Graecia, the Greek cities of southern Italy. We follow Tarentum, Pyrrhus, the Roman Senate, and the soldiers who met elephants for the first time on Italian soil. And we watch Rome pass through its first great test against a king of the Hellenistic age. Part 2. Southern Italy and the Greek cities. To understand the war with Pyrrhus, we must begin in southern Italy. Long before Roman power reached the region, Greek settlers had founded prosperous cities along the coast. These cities were part of what the Romans later called Magna Graecia, Great Greece. Places such as Tarentum, Croton, Sybaris, Locri, and Rhegium were not small cultural outposts. They were wealthy, sophisticated, and deeply connected to the Greek-speaking Mediterranean. Tarentum was especially important. Founded by Spartan settlers, it became one of the richest Greek cities in Italy. Its harbour was excellent, its culture was refined, its citizens valued music, theatre, philosophy, luxury, and maritime trade. To the Greeks of Tarentum, Rome looked rough, disciplined, and dangerous, a rising inland power without the elegance of Greek civilization. But Rome was moving south. After the Samnite Wars, Rome's influence spread across central and southern Italy. Roman colonies, roads, alliances, and military obligations slowly tightened the peninsula. Rome did not always conquer by destruction. Often it conquered through treaties, obligations, and networks of dependence. Cities were allowed to keep local customs, but they were expected to provide soldiers, obey Roman foreign policy, and accept Rome's leadership in war. To Tarentum, this was a threat. The Greek cities had always balanced between local Italian peoples, Greek politics, and foreign powers. But Rome was different. Rome did not arrive like a raiding army and then vanish. Rome stayed. Rome built roads. Rome planted colonies. Rome created systems. Once Rome entered a region, it became difficult to remove. The immediate crisis began when Roman ships appeared in waters that Tarentum considered restricted by earlier agreements. The Tarentines reacted violently. Roman vessels were attacked. A Roman embassy sent to negotiate was reportedly insulted. Whether every detail of the later Roman accounts is reliable or not, the larger reality is clear. Tarentum feared Roman expansion and chose resistance. But Tarentum had a problem. It was rich, cultured, and proud, but it was not strong enough to face Rome alone. Like many Greek cities before it, Tarentum looked across the sea for a powerful protector. It called upon Pyrrhus, king of Epirus. And with that invitation, Rome's conflict with the Greek city became something much larger. It became a war between the Roman Republic and a Hellenistic king. Part 3. Pyrrhus of Epirus, a king in the shadow of Alexander. Pyrrhus was not an ordinary commander. He came from Epirus, a kingdom in northwestern Greece, and he belonged to the restless world left behind after Alexander the Great. When Alexander died in 323 BCE, his empire did not remain united. His generals and successors fought over its territories, creating a violent age of kingdoms, alliances, betrayals, and professional armies. This was the Hellenistic world, a world of ambitious monarchs, large armies, siege engines, mercenaries, cavalry, elephants, and royal propaganda. Kings did not simply rule, they performed power. They claimed heroic ancestry, minted coins with their images, founded cities, and fought wars to prove legitimacy. Pyrrhus grew up in this world. He was brave, energetic, and personally charismatic. Ancient writers often compared him to Alexander, not because he built an empire like Alexander, but because he seemed to share Alexander's courage and hunger for glory. He was admired as a battlefield commander, especially for his ability to inspire troops and act boldly under pressure. But Pyrrhus also had weaknesses. His ambition was larger than his political stability. He moved from one opportunity to another: Macedonia, Greece, Italy, Sicily. He could win battles, but he struggled to build lasting systems. In this way, he was almost the opposite of Rome. Pyrrhus was brilliant, dramatic, and royal. Rome was patient, institutional, and collective. When Tarentum invited him to Italy, Pyrrhus saw more than a local war. He saw the possibility of a Western empire. Perhaps he could defeat Rome, protect the Greek cities, dominate southern Italy, challenge Carthage in Sicily, and become the great Greek ruler of the Western Mediterranean. It was a dream worthy of the age of Alexander. He crossed to Italy in 280 BCE with a powerful army. His forces included Greek infantry, cavalry, archers, slingers, and most famously, war elephants. These elephants were not simply weapons, they were psychological instruments. Many Roman soldiers had never seen such animals in battle. The sight alone could break formation, frighten horses, and create confusion. Pyrrhus arrived as a king from a wider world. Rome met him as a republic still learning the scale of Mediterranean war. And when the two armies approached each other near Heraclea, the first great test began. Part 4. The Battle of Heraclea. Rome sees elephants. The Battle of Heraclea in 280 BCE was one of the most important early encounters between Rome and the Hellenistic military tradition. The battlefield lay in southern Italy, near the river Siris. On one side stood Roman citizen soldiers, formed by the discipline of the Republic. On the other stood Pyrrhus and his professional Greek-style army. The Romans were not primitive soldiers. By this period, they had already developed a flexible military system shaped by wars against the Samnites and other Italian peoples. Their manipular formation allowed units to move with more independence than the older Greek phalanx. Roman soldiers were used to hard campaigns, rough terrain, and prolonged conflict. But Pyrrhus brought a different kind of battlefield experience. His infantry was trained in the Macedonian style, using long pikes in deep formation. His cavalry was strong, his officers were experienced, and his elephants created a problem that Roman soldiers had never fully faced. The battle was hard fought. Roman infantry did not collapse easily. Ancient accounts emphasize that Pyrrhus was impressed by their discipline. He expected courage, but not this level of endurance from an Italian republic. The Romans pushed fiercely, and the battle remained uncertain for a long time. Then Pyrrhus used his elephants. The effect was devastating. Roman horses panicked, formations were disrupted. Men who had never seen elephants in battle faced enormous animals carrying towers and soldiers, moving like living fortresses through the noise of combat. The Romans were forced back. Pyrrhus won the battle. But the victory came at a cost. Pyrrhus lost many experienced soldiers, including men who could not easily be replaced. Rome also suffered, but Rome had deeper reserves inside Italy. Pyrrhus had crossed the sea with a royal army. Every veteran he lost was precious. Every officer mattered. Every casualty weakened the core of his expedition. After Heraclea, Pyrrhus expected Italian communities to abandon Rome and join him. Some did, but not enough. Rome did not collapse. The Senate did not beg for peace on humiliating terms. The alliance system held better than Pyrrhus hoped. Rome absorbed the blow and prepared to continue. This is one of the central lessons of the war. Pyrrhus could defeat Roman armies in the field, but he could not easily defeat the Roman state. For many ancient kings, one great battle could decide a war. Against Rome, victory in battle was only the beginning of the problem. Part 5. Rome refuses to bend. After Heraclea, diplomacy became as important as battle. Pyrrhus tried to negotiate. He did not necessarily want endless war with Rome if a favorable settlement could secure his position in southern Italy. His advisor Cineas, known in ancient tradition as a skilled speaker, was sent to Rome to discuss peace. The Roman Senate faced a difficult question. Should Rome accept terms after defeat, or should it continue fighting against a king who had already beaten its army? For many states, the logical answer would have been compromise. Rome had lost men, the enemy was dangerous, the war was far from home. Peace might preserve strength. But Rome's political culture placed enormous value on endurance, dignity, and refusal under pressure. The Senate understood that if Rome accepted peace after defeat, its allies might begin to doubt Roman leadership. A republic that led Italy through fear and obligation could not appear weak before a foreign king. Ancient tradition gives a powerful role to Appius Claudius Caecus, the elderly statesman who supposedly argued that Rome should never negotiate while an enemy remained on Italian soil. Whether the speech is preserved accurately or shaped by later memory, the message reflects something real about Roman political identity. Rome preferred danger to humiliation. Pyrrhus was surprised. He had met many Greek cities that changed sides when power shifted. He had met kingdoms where diplomacy followed battlefield fortune. But Rome was different. It behaved less like a city recovering from defeat and more like a state capable of replacing armies. This refusal mattered deeply. It told Pyrrhus that defeating Rome would require more than tactical brilliance. He would have to break Rome's alliances, destroy its confidence, and force its political class to accept defeat. That was much harder than winning a single battle. Rome's allies also mattered. Some communities did defect, especially in the south, where Greek influence and anti-Roman feeling were stronger. But many remained loyal or cautious. The Roman alliance system was not based only on affection. It was based on law, obligation, hostages, colonies, shared military service, and the fear of Roman punishment. It had roots. Pyrrhus had entered Italy expecting that Rome's power might crack after a major defeat. Instead, he found a system that bent, but did not break. Part 6. Asculum and the meaning of a Pyrrhic victory. The second major battle came at Asculum in 279 BCE. Once again, Pyrrhus faced the Romans in a brutal contest. Once again, his army had advantages: experienced troops, cavalry, elephants, and the prestige of a king who had already defeated Rome. Once again, the Romans fought with determination. The Battle of Asculum was long and costly. Ancient sources differ in details, but the larger result is clear. Pyrrhus won, yet the victory damaged him severely. His army suffered heavy losses. Many of the men who died were not replaceable in the same way Roman soldiers were replaceable. Rome could raise new legions from its citizen body and allies. Pyrrhus depended on a smaller corps of trained soldiers far from home. This is where the famous idea of the Pyrrhic victory comes from. According to later tradition, Pyrrhus looked at the cost of success and understood the danger. One more victory like this, and he might be ruined. The phrase survives because it expresses a brutal truth of strategy. Not every victory strengthens the winner. A battle can be won on the field and lost in the larger war. A commander can hold the ground, count enemy dead, and still move closer to failure. The question is not only who wins today, the question is who can continue tomorrow. Rome's strength was not elegance, it was continuation. After Asculum, Pyrrhus had defeated Rome twice, yet he had not solved the central problem. Rome still existed. Rome still recruited. Rome still held much of its alliance network. The Senate still refused surrender. Meanwhile, Pyrrhus was bleeding away the very army that made him dangerous. His Italian campaign began to lose clarity. He was strong enough to frighten Rome, but not strong enough to finish Rome. He was famous enough to attract allies, but not stable enough to unite all of southern Italy behind him. And soon, another opportunity pulled him away from the Roman war. That opportunity was Sicily. The Greek cities of Sicily were under pressure from Carthage, the powerful Phoenician-founded city in North Africa. They asked Pyrrhus for help. To Pyrrhus, Sicily offered a new path to greatness. If he could defeat Carthage there, he might control the island, gain resources, and return to Italy stronger. So Pyrrhus left the Italian front and crossed to Sicily. Rome had survived the first phase of the storm. Part 7. Sicily, Carthage, and the limits of Pyrrhus. Sicily was one of the great prizes of the ancient Mediterranean. Its grain, harbours, and position between Italy and North Africa made it strategically vital. Greek cities occupied parts of the island, while Carthage controlled strong positions in the west. For generations, Sicily had been a battlefield between Greek and Carthaginian power. When Pyrrhus arrived, he achieved real success. He pushed back Carthaginian forces and gained influence among the Sicilian Greeks. For a moment, his Western dream seemed alive again. Perhaps he could become master of Sicily. Perhaps he could use the island as a base for a larger war. Perhaps Rome and Carthage could both be challenged by one ambitious Greek king. But Pyrrhus's weakness appeared again. He could win battles and capture cities, but he struggled to govern allies patiently. Greek cities that had welcomed him as a liberator began to see him as a demanding monarch. He needed money, soldiers, ships, and obedience. Liberation slowly began to feel like occupation. This pattern was common in the Hellenistic world. Kings promised protection, but protection required taxation. Armies promised security, but armies needed supplies. A city could invite a powerful ruler to save it from one enemy and then discover that the savior expected submission. Meanwhile, Rome was not destroyed. Rome used time well. It rebuilt. It continued operations in Italy. It strengthened its position while Pyrrhus became entangled elsewhere. This was another Roman advantage: patience. Rome did not need to shine dramatically in every moment. It needed to remain. Eventually, Sicily became frustrating for Pyrrhus. The Greek cities were difficult to control. Carthage remained dangerous. His resources were strained. The great Western Empire he imagined seemed to move farther away the longer he pursued it. He returned to Italy in 276 BCE, but the situation had changed. His army was smaller. His allies were less confident. Rome had learned from earlier defeats. The shock of elephants and Hellenistic tactics was no longer completely new. The final major stage of the war would come near Beneventum, a place whose name itself would later reflect Roman confidence. Before Roman victory, it had been known as Maleventum. Afterward, it became Beneventum, the place of good fortune. Part 8. Beneventum and the Roman lesson. The Battle of Beneventum in 275 BCE did not have the same legendary drama as Heraclea, but it was decisive in meaning. Pyrrhus faced Roman forces once again, but this time the balance had shifted. The Romans had adapted. They were no longer meeting elephants as complete strangers. They had learned, suffered, and adjusted. Roman armies were rarely perfect, but they were capable of learning through defeat. This is one of the most important features of Roman military history. Rome often began wars clumsily. It made mistakes. It underestimated enemies. It suffered disasters. But over time, it studied the problem, changed methods, and returned with more discipline. At Beneventum, Pyrrhus failed to achieve the kind of victory he needed. The battle ended without the decisive success that could rescue his Italian campaign. His army was exhausted. His political project in southern Italy was weakening. The cost of staying had become too high. Pyrrhus withdrew from Italy and returned east. He would continue his restless career in Greece and Macedonia, but his Western dream was over. A few years later, he died in a street fight in Argos, far from the empire he had imagined. For Rome, the result was transformative. Rome had not simply survived Pyrrhus, it had outlasted him. The Greek cities of southern Italy now understood that outside kings could come and go, but Rome remained. Tarentum eventually submitted. Roman power extended over southern Italy. The peninsula was not yet perfectly unified, but the direction was clear. Rome had become the dominant power in Italy. This victory also changed Rome's reputation beyond Italy. Greek observers, Carthaginians and other Mediterranean powers now had to take Rome seriously. A republic that could survive Pyrrhus was not ordinary. It had faced one of the most respected commanders of the age and had not collapsed. Rome learned from Pyrrhus too. It learned about elephants, Hellenistic armies, Greek diplomacy, and the larger strategic world beyond Italy. It learned that the Mediterranean was interconnected. A conflict in Tarentum could involve Epirus, Sicily, and Carthage. Italian politics could no longer be separated from international politics. This lesson would soon matter even more, because Rome's next great enemy would not be a Greek king. It would be Carthage. Part 9. Conclusion. Why Pyrrhus Matters. The war with Pyrrhus stands between two eras of Roman history. Before it, Rome was mainly an Italian power, expanding through local wars, alliances, colonies, and gradual domination. After it, Rome began to face the great powers of the Mediterranean. The Pyrrhic War was a doorway. Pyrrhus himself is one of the most fascinating figures in Rome's early story because he was both dangerous and incomplete. He had courage, talent, and imagination. He could win battles against Roman armies. He understood the glory of kingship and the drama of war. But he could not create what Rome was creating, a durable system. Rome's genius was not in one heroic commander. It was in institutions, manpower, discipline, obligation, memory, and repetition. A Roman army could be destroyed, and another could be raised. A consul could fail, and another would be elected. An enemy could win a battle, but Rome would continue the war. This is why Pyrrhus matters. He exposed the difference between brilliance and endurance. His victories at Heraclea and Asculum showed that Rome could be beaten tactically. His failure to break Rome showed that tactical victory was not enough. Against Rome, war became a contest of systems. Pyrrhus brought a royal army. Rome brought a political structure capable of absorbing defeat. In the calm distance of history, we can see the deeper meaning. Rome's future empire was not born only from conquest, it was born from survival. Again and again, Rome would meet enemies who seemed more brilliant, more dramatic, or more terrifying. Pyrrhus, Hannibal, Mithridates, and others would test Roman strength. Some would win great victories, some would humiliate Roman armies, but the Roman state learned how to turn survival into domination. So when Pyrrhus sailed away from Italy, he left behind more than defeated hopes. He left behind a Rome that had discovered something about itself. It had faced the military culture of Alexander's world and endured. It had learned that the Mediterranean was larger and more dangerous than Italy. And it had shown that Rome's most frightening weapon was not the sword, the spear, or even the legion. It was the refusal to stop. The next stage of Roman history would carry this refusal across the sea. For just beyond Sicily stood Carthage, rich, naval, ancient, and powerful. Rome had survived the king from Epirus. Now it would meet the great merchant empire of North Africa. And the struggle for the Western Mediterranean was about to begin.